executive producer of the program, and Mr. Harding LeMay, the writer of the program, and begin by really a general comment, which is, so many people sit around and wonder, why do people watch soap operas? In fact, last night we were talking with Jimmy Breslin and his wife about that question, and Mrs. Breslin was saying that she just gets an incredible kick out of watching the woman who's staying with them not only watch them every day, but go by and actually yell at the characters and say, you're doing a bad thing, or why are you being so mean? That person was so nice to you, and what's the matter with you? Really identifying with it, so much so that I remember there was a grandmother who lived next door to me when I was a little kid who kept writing letters into one of the soap operas to tell the woman, your child is right down the block. You don't understand. She's right down the block. And there's something, people talk about it in terms of an addiction. They talk about it. I don't understand it because I know that it's on for me all the time, and I have some answers for myself, but I'd be interested, Mr. Rausch, in your sense of who your audience is and why they are watching it.
Well, demographically, we appeal to women in the highest incidence in the 18 to 39 age group, and then a high incidence of women in the 50s. I think essentially we identify with women because the characters whom we are using on the show represent in quintessence those women who do watch. I think the experiences that they have are those experiences which a lot of women have. And I'm going to disagree with something Susan said before about it being slice of life. In any drama, in any nighttime drama, in an Ironside, Ironside has a major case every week, and he faces an enormous travail every week. I think as long as you properly motivate the incident and justify the behavior of the character in the story, then the audience will buy it. And I think that all circumstances leading up to story need to be properly motivated and directed so that women can identify, or people who watch the program can identify with the story you're telling.
You know, what really strikes me, and Mr. LeMay, I'd be interested in your thought about this. Renata Adler, who's a journalist that I respect a great deal, wrote about Another World, and she said in it that she was absolutely dumbfounded when she realized that when one of the characters died, she cried. And here she is, a sophisticated woman. She was watching these things. They were off in the background, just like I say. I don't really know what's going on. I could tell you the plot of these things all the way through. And then she realized that it had something to do with the mobility of life in New York City where she lived, and that these characters she saw every day, and she was with them.
I really have a very strong conviction that what we call daytime serials represent that clan that we all miss now. We used to know our uncles, our aunts. We used to know everybody's personal histories 100 years ago, let's say. Today, we don't know our brothers and our sisters, or our aunts and our uncles, or our parents in many cases anymore. They live thousands of miles away. And it seems to me that that's one of the great appeals, which is not the appeal of Broadway theater, let's say.
Right.
It's not Tennessee Williams and Edward Albee. But it does seem to me that the identity that makes us all cry, because I do it too, even in other people's programs, and is...
Admitting terrific.
that does awaken some knowledge we have of our own relationships that we're not fulfilling much anymore. We live with our wives and children, or perhaps alone, many of us, and we don't exercise that empathy with another person's small problems.
Could I ask you a question? I mean, I know a little bit more about you, besides being the writer of Another World, and I know you've written a beautiful book, Inside Looking Out, which talks about a childhood of 13 children in the Canadian farmlands. Is there a sense in which that background of so many children around, or a family, has anything to do with the script that you're writing?
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, it has everything to do with everything I write. I could no more write this and not draw on... That's the only way I know life, is the way I've lived it. Luckily, I've lived an extraordinarily varied life. I've been in big business as well as on that farmland. I've been in the theater, I've been in the army. So that I have a wide range to draw upon, perhaps. But I could no more write Steve Frame, which I enjoy writing enormously, without drawing on a great deal of my own feeling, because he happens to be in very much of a situation that I'm in my own marriage. I mean, not the problems in the marriage, but marrying someone I never would have dreamed of being able to marry when I was 12 years old.
And trying to come to copes with being worthy of that?
And trying to come to copes with moving into another social strata. I mean, when I have to wear a tuxedo to a party, I have little traumas about that.
I'd be interested, George, what kind of a relationship develops between the actor and the writer as the writing is going along, and you know what he's creating for you?
Well, if he likes you, it's good. But I think that he picks up your rhythm. He knows what you're good at, what you do well. He can write. He begins to write for you. He knows your timing.
I must say, I write for the theater too. And there's a marvelous thing about knowing the actor you're writing for. When you sit down for 2 years and write a 3-act play, you don't know who's going to play it. As a matter of fact, the people you want to play it never end up playing it. And so the thing you had in your mind is not related to a human being's behavior, but to watch day after day actors doing roles and then write scenes for them is absolutely the most exhilarating thing I've ever done.
Is that? Oh, that's
Yeah,
a very interesting insight.
Certainly.
If you don't like an actor, I mean, they may be a fine actor, but personally there are qualities about them that you can see because this is, in this form, you get to know
Yes,
an
I would
individual
imagine
quite
so.
well. Is it difficult for you to write for them?
I don't use the word like in that sense. All human beings are interesting. And so that you find the ones that you don't respond to perhaps personally, you write a different way for.
I think Pete may also be responding to the strengths and weaknesses of the actor whom he's working with, or what he describes as the strengths and
Yeah.
weaknesses as he sees them.
You try to find in the actor that thing that will carry a meaning. When you talked earlier about, I can't remember to quote you exactly, but there are these, not everybody has these enormous problems every week, which is true, they don't. But everybody has a hint or an echo of those emotional problems that are going through, because Another World particularly is a domestic soap opera. It deals with marital relationships, with romance. It's not it's not melodramatic.
Which really raises, in a way, the interesting question of how you're dealing with subjects in terms of the changes within decades. For example, do you feel freer now to talk about abortions and to talk about women's roles being different? And how does that work in? Is that a policy decision?
I don't know if it's policy. I think that in order to meet the changing times, there are some things we can and some things we can't do or shouldn't do. The birth control pill makes it a little untimely for us to have pregnancies appear as quickly or as spontaneously as they used to in serials.
That I didn't even think about.
Right.
That slows your time down in terms of getting these families.
I think that we have to be responsive, otherwise the drama will not be reflective of society.
It's interesting to me, at least it seems to me, that abortion has been raised up to the point of people considering the possibility of having it, but in none of the soaps that I've seen has anybody actually had one, which is maybe something that will eventually come, but they all go through mental drama and eventually have the child.
No, we did. We've had an abortion.
Were we the first?
Oh, is that so? Well, I must have missed that.
Pat Randolph had an abortion.
Before she was married.
What she's doing
But it
with
was
Oh, that was a long time ago then.
But it was
That's
characterized as a heinous act.
There
I mean,
was-
it was something that wasn't a very nice thing to do. Okay.
What do you feel about trying to create role models for women other than domestic marital models? Is that
What do
something
you
you
mean
think
by
about?
role models?
Yeah, that's a very stuffy word. I sound like I'm coming out of sociology. Women who are doing careers and jobs in addition to roaming around having loves and having murders
You
and
mean,
all
should
of
we
that.
characterize women who work as black hats and women who stay at home as white hats?
No, I don't think you even need to make one evil or one not. I'm just saying, does it mean that you're trying to introduce more of those characters today? Do you even think about that, or is that not something that...
No, I think we are thinking about it. I think Pete can respond to that question because this is something we do want to get into. That, again, is reflective of what we're doing today, what our society
Yeah,
is.
I think as a matter of fact, we do, in some ways, even now, deal with things that 5 years ago or 10 years ago. In that sense, the more independent kind of woman, if you want to call it that. It seems to me this isn't a new concept, by the way. The career women have been around for a long time, and the liberated woman was really liberated long ago. I mean, the liberated woman was.
The real liberated woman.
Madame Curie was liberated, let's face it.
Madame Bovary.
Emma Bovary.
In a very
But you
different
see, I
way.
would like to bring up a point about that, because I teach literature at Hunter College as well as this, and I am on both ends of this. I teach Emma Bovary, you reminded me, and Crime and Punishment, and Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, at the same time that I'm writing this. And it seems to me that the similarities are much stronger than the differences. And that all of the talk that George brought up about the pseudo-intellectuals is baloney. If Alfred Kazin would sit down and really look at Madame Bovary, he'd read one of the finest soap operas ever written.
It's a very
And
interesting
Crime and Punishment has the most perfect tags of every chapter, actual visual television tags that I've ever read. Now, it seems to me that we tend to categorize so much, not only in television, but when you talk about the woman coming up, I think we have characters on the program right now who are, Bernice is one actually, who's
That's
a
right,
liberated
that's right.
woman. I would like to move into the fact that a woman might be able to make a choice that would outrage other women who aren't liberated.
And the incredible thing that happens to me is when I watch it, especially around Christmas time, when everybody gathers around the hearth, and I elected not to go to see my family at Christmas out in California because I thought I have to work on this book on Lyndon Johnson, I've got to be a martyr. And I saw all of you gathering around the hearth at Christmas time, and I felt terrible. And what you tap in me is not my career instincts at all, but the fact that I come from an Irish Catholic family, everybody had children, they got married at 20, and what's the matter with me? Why am I running around at Harvard University? So you see what you're doing to me. Which raises, I'd like to just get a feeling from George and Susan and some of the mechanics of it as well. You said you tape once a day, is that right, Susan?
Yeah. You come in, just really very briefly, get to Brooklyn at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you have what is called a dry run, where you find out where you're going to move and walk and what you're going to pick up, what you're going to put down, without cameras. And then you go in between all of this, ladies, you have to do your hair, and you have to put on your makeup, and you have to find your costume, you've got to get your shoes, and you've got to eat your lunch, and you've got to put your eyelashes on. Okay. So that's in between all of what I'm telling you. All right. Then at 10:30, you block for the cameras. That's so the cameras know where you're going.
Right.
Then you go up and you finish putting on your eyelashes and put on your shoes. Okay. Then you run down at 11:30, and you never stop. It never stops. You run down at 11:30, and you have what is called a run-through with lots of screaming and noises, where you do everything that you're going to do finally. Then you go and finish putting your eyes, blah, 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 and then you come down and have a dress rehearsal.
Oh,
And that's supposed to be just exactly the way it's going to be when you really do it.
How long ahead of time have you gotten the script for that day?
Oh, about, what, a week and a half?
We get them about a week, yeah.
And everybody learns it differently. I'd like to learn my script the night before. So there's always tension and pressure in my life. I never want anything to be secure. I want it always to be just at the edge of danger. And it is just at the edge of danger. And then, after that final dress rehearsal, you do the show. And if you forget a line, or if you go...
Yeah, that's what I want to ask. What about mistakes and you're forgetting a line?
Well, unless it's absolutely horrendous, you just go on and you look at a teleprompter.
My joke has always been, you have to drop dead first before they'll stop.
Is that so?
Then they'll revive you and do it over again. No, it's, you know, a part of the challenge is, as from an actor's standpoint, is being able to do it in one act. If you can deliver, I tell you, if you can deliver under these circumstances, you can deliver anywhere.
Under almost anything.
The reason for doing it, as George says, is in order to maintain, in a false sense, the spontaneity of a live performance. Until a few years ago, most daytime serials were done live. As a matter of fact, 2 are done live today. And do you have to break?
No. It's just that I'm looking over there and they're telling me we still have 5 more minutes.
2 are done live today. The rest are on tape because of exigencies of the business, because there are a few tape machines and lots of programs. But we reconstruct a live situation in order to create that feeling of spontaneity. I would prefer if the program were done live, because I think that there is an extra measure of quality that comes from the actors in a live situation. But we don't go back for that reason. You don't agree?
No,
Well, it's a little frightening, it really is. But I do agree with you. I feel you adjust to that. I think you're absolutely right, Paul. You really do.
You're all too young to have been in the early days of television when everything was live. I was an actor in those days, and I was on, numerous shows where there were horrendous mistakes you wouldn't believe.
Now, what would happen if an actor or an actress is so identified with a character that people will really be upset if a new actor or actress has to take that character's place? Is that decision sometimes made that you write the character out and he or she dies suddenly or gets missing? Or usually do you start breaking in a new role and a new character and somehow the audience gets used to it?
Before somebody answers you intelligently, I must tell you a story about that. There's a woman who wrote in, I think my character at that point was having a craniotomy. But talk about deep tragedy. He had a serious operation. He fell off a crane or something.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Right, that's right.
That was very sad.
It was terrible. And he was wrapped in bandages. And a woman wrote in and said, I know how you do these things on soaps. She said, don't you dare recast that role. She said, George Reinhold's going to be under those bandages for 6 months, and his contract is going to run out, and you're going to recast the role and take the bandages off, and it'll be Shepard Strudwick.
Has it ever happened that people have identified you on the street as your characters? Or people that you meet?
All the time.
Constantly. It's the most devoted audience in the world. It is
I would imagine that's
It is
true.
an actor's dream. Something very funny is that there's a very, what I call very 50s attitude that actors have. And it's, it's like, it's an extension of, I want to be left alone, don't let the public near me. They want response. These people really want response. They want some kind of real live action, real thing from you as the actor. It's the most beautiful audience in the world. They're terribly involved, completely devoted.
Let me ask a question of cultural changes. I remember when I was working in Washington a couple of years ago, and it was after the time of all the race riots, and people were trying to think very widely about what are we going to do about changing people's attitudes about race. And I remember a whole conference was spent, we've got to get them changed in the soap operas, that's the only way you're going to be able to make an impact. And people were trying to think we must contact the writers or something because it's the only kind of media that reaches people every day, and that if they see subtle changes of black people dealing with white people on a very easy basis, then it'll get into their lives. Is that a lot of hogwash, or do you feel a responsibility as a writer to deal with shifting cultural attitudes that you might hope would be shifted?
I think if you're serious, as I at least assume I am, you can't avoid that. It's not even conscious with you. You're part of this world. You're part of, your children know things you don't know. You are trying to put into your work these things that are part of our society. And I think this particular series does use blacks. For instance, we have a young girl as a law associate. She's not a lawyer yet. She's going to law school. She deals with people who 20 years ago she would have been cleaning the office. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if that can be done overnight. Commercials seem to be doing a lot more than we are.
Yeah, that's very true.
Lena Horne was doing a special one day out in Brooklyn. She stopped me in the hall, and she watches it constantly, and she loves it. She says, you know, if I'm out working somewhere, I call Fran of Kukla, Fran and Ollie, and you know, get the lowdown. But she said it would be marvelous to see Mickey. She said, you know, like really have a real problem, you know, like real people, you know.
Yeah. Oh,
that is big, you know.
I wish we could go on with this for a long time. You know, it's funny, just one last thing to say about it. I can remember when I finished taking my oral exams, the very day after it, I was no longer sitting at home, no longer had the excuse that this is in the background, and suddenly it became 3 o'clock the next afternoon, and I found myself telling a friend, I can't meet you because I've got to watch this thing, and panicked, and then said, why should I tell you?